Hey everybody, welcome back to the Truth Expedition. You've tuned into the program where we dig for truth in this insane clown show of a world where the fact checkers lie and the government and the media propagandize you and me, the citizens of this amazing world. As always, joined by my friend and co-host Gunnar Ballstad. How's Gunnar doing today?
I'm doing so great. I'm so excited for today's guest. I can't believe we're being joined by the one and only Ryan Dawson. We're going to talk about his new film, The 9/11 Redux, and the ceasefire in Gaza, many other things. I can't wait.
Yeah, this is coming right off a James Corbett interview into another legend in the truth space, Ryan Dawson. If you don't know who Ryan Dawson is, you really need to do some research and follow his work at ancreport.com, ancreport.com. That's the anti-neocon report. Ryan has been doing more research than anyone in the world, I would say, and before it was cool, on Epstein, 9/11, geopolitics, really kind of the OG in this space. He's been canceled everywhere, and it is a major honor. What a privilege to have you on. Thanks for joining us on the Truth Expedition, Ryan.
Lovely setup you guys got there with the neon. Awesome. I just got a giant 9/11 map behind me and Epstein and Numek.
Hey, yeah, I think those are way cooler anyway, for sure.
So for the viewers that might just tune in and not watch this whole interview, tell us what you want people to know about where they can find your work, where they can support you financially, things like that.
RyanDawson.org, just like it says right there. And it'll give you a pop-up page to subscribe. You can subscribe for free, like for zero amount if you want. It's fine. So it's just, you can choose that or you can donate if you want, but it's free. And the movie's free. The newest movie I made is a 4-hour documentary on 9/11. If you just want to get right to the Israeli stuff, just skip to 1 hour and 11 minutes. And that's when it starts. Because I know that's what people are going to do. So I'll just help you. And it's free. Yep.
Cool, Ryan. So last time we had you on, we really went over the 9/11 situation in depth. I don't think we need to redo that again, but just so the viewers, if we can catch them up, I have like a true false, maybe 8 items here. If you want to just give us a true false, if you want to elaborate,
sure, yeah.
But for the kooks out there, so true or false, directed energy weapons were used to take down the towers.
What kind of energy isn't kinetic energy? Oh yeah, of course, that's false.
Yep. Uninterruptible autopilot was used to guide the planes.
No.
A plane hit the Pentagon.
Yes.
4 airplanes were hijacked on 9/11.
4 were hijacked on 9/11. A 5th was hijacked on 9/13, or attempted.
Okay. Larry Silverstein knew the plan.
No, he did not.
Otago warned of the attacks.
That is true.
Building 7 was a controlled demolition.
False.
Israel was the primary player in 9/11.
It was a trifecta with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S.
Cool. That's what I've got for 9/11.
I mean, Al-Qaeda is the primary player, but Al-Qaeda is not wholly separate from intelligence agencies then, before, or after.
All right. Any follow-up to that, Gunnar?
Well, yeah, I mean, lots. So let's get into that. Okay, so what was the main updates, the refresh and the redux? What types of information did you focus on to update the documentary?
The major update was the visuals. I made that first one by myself on Windows Movie Maker. It's 5 hours long, and it had a lot on PNAC and Iraq and the upcoming war in Syria, which I predicted in that film, and stuff on the 28 pages that I was like pushing to get unredacted, which is no longer necessary because they were unredacted by the time the new film came out. So I got to cut all of that and make it a little shorter. And we had more information as recently as December of 2024. We were still getting names and things. This is coming partly from the lawsuits from the 9/11 victims' families, and just digging through more FBI and even British sources, because they arrested Omar Bayoumi, for example. And more footage of him came out, more on his background. This is a middleman working for the Saudi state. They acted as a liaison to help hijackers find a place to live, gave them logistical support, financial support. He was definitely an operative, and he was working under Prince Bandar, who was working in tandem with the CIA. So we had more on that, more on the Israeli art students and DEA groups, because that before it was too much of a headache. It was over 200 names. So I just said, here's something for the future. Future has come. So I put that out. We went over the Shea memorandum, more on the conflicts of interest of the 9/11 Commission, a lot more on the anthrax investigation, and even more damning information on what they call the dancing Israelis, but it's a lot worse than that. So it's pretty big. We know who had access to the towers prior. That was in the old film, but it wasn't presented well. It was like a slideshow. This is a proper movie.
100%. I've gotten through most of it. There's a lot of content there, and it's fantastic. So I especially was intrigued by the updates to the Dancing Israelis discussion, especially
Oh, and the money
where,
laundering too. I put a lot of new info on who got what from who through the
for
different
sure.
madrasas and things. Yeah. That might be
So
boring to people, but it's necessary to know
well, I think
the
that's
network.
the most important thing that you're doing here, Ryan, is you're telling the story behind 9/11. I mean, the physics is one thing,
Mhm.
the ultimate goals, the aspirations of greater Israel is another thing, but you have gone through with a fine-tooth comb and looked at the who and the why and the what. And so I
Mhm.
think that's what's so fascinating. And especially I recently heard that the dancing Israelis alleged that they were up at the observation. What was it? What was the apartment complex that they were at?
Doric Towers.
Yeah. Okay. So when they were at the official claim, that they made was that they went there after the first plane hit so that they could
Yeah,
observe. But in your documentary, you talk about how that's actually false. Can you
that's definitely
describe that?
false. So there's five different men. Three were witness celebrating. Two were picked up and were arrested in the same van with the other three. So it's a total of five. One of those was the brother of, like, Paul Kurzberg's the brother of Sivan. Sivan was celebrating with Oded Elder and Jorn Schmuel. Then they picked up Mamari and Paul Kurzberg later at White Glove, which is another moving company. And in their timelines, what they told the Joint Terrorist Task Force and FBI was something like, well, we heard the news and then we raced out there. Say, well, you couldn't have heard the news until after a plane hit. If that's your story, you have to have appeared there after 8:46, really after about 8:50, because you can't instantly get from urban moving systems to Doric Towers. So like if you were looking out the window and heard bang or something, and then you raced out there, but they were in position before the first plane hit. And many of them are either said they heard the news around 8:20 or 8 o'clock, which is impossible because there was no news because it hadn't happened yet, or they place it way after, like, we didn't go out there till 10. Well, you're definitely there before 10 because you photographed yourself there. We know.
Right.
And more damning is there are multiple witnesses from Doric Towers, and it's not just Maria Septimrelli with the binoculars. She is one witness that was in a movie, so everyone knows her. There are other witnesses. They pointed them out in the police lineup. And apparently it wasn't just them. They were the ones dumb enough to get out and high five each other and hug each other and sit on top of their van. There was another urban moving systems truck behind their truck that was disciplined enough to just sit there, look at it, and then leave. But we have their truck passing the gas station right next to urban movie systems at 8:31, which then, if the plane hits at 8:46, and they were already on their way there around 8:30, 8:31. It means they were already getting in place. Basically, with the news they heard is the plane had been hijacked, because that had been learned around 8:28. And so then they get in their car and go. And they arrive there somewhere between 8:31 and 8:45 because they're filming the first plane.
And you would know that because you actually made that drive from Urban Moving
I
Systems
did.
to
And I also have the
right.
request to Quantico by the CIA to analyze the pictures of their van passing the gas station, and it's time stamped. That's it.
Yeah.
They were there. They had foreknowledge. And I have redundant information on that, like, and
Right.
this and that's what's in the
Right.
film. It's like, and it's really damning because why would they all have five different stories? They all say, "Oh, it was this time. No, it was that time, and we came there. We went there." They all lied. They said one of them, Jorn said, I was still in New York when that happened. I wasn't even in New Jersey. I didn't even come across the tunnel. And you can just look at their seats through their car and like, yes, you did. Like, you're a liar. Like, you are lying.
Let's talk about the
And they
fight.
even said, so what they did is they filmed it at Doric Tower, then they went to White Glove, and then they went back to Urban Moving Systems, went on top of the roof, took some more pictures because they hang out for the planes to hit the buildings, and then they're out there waiting for the buildings to go. And so they filmed all that. And somewhere they were on Route 3 near the Meadowlands when they got pulled over. And the reason for the time lapse is because the witness that called the police, who had binoculars and could see their license plate, waited till her husband got home before she did it. So it wasn't until like 3 p.m, and they put out the bolo and they caught him around 3:56. And we have their cell phone records and what calls are being made. And they're all like making calls. Oh shit, we're being pulled over.
The information in your documentary is incredibly telling and damning against that particular case. I mean, for sure. I think it's open and shut, and you've done an excellent job exposing that. Let's talk
Well,
about the fight.
there's another group in Liberty State Park. I mean, it's not just the dancing Israelis. So
Right.
that's what I hope people watch. Glenn Ford from Blacklisted News was a witness there. They had fake press passes. They were the wrong color. And they joked about it like, they're easy to get. Why would you tell me that? Like, whoa, is this something you do all the time? Like, you get fake press passes?
Right.
And for what? They're in the park. They must have been in there early because the park was closed when the first plane hit. They shut the park down, so no vehicles could get in. But they're there with a brand new car already. Just what a coincidence. And they're documenting the event. And they lied to him because they were speaking Hebrew to each other, and they said they were Polish, and he knew that isn't true. You can tell without being fluent in language what language it is. You know, like you can tell if someone's speaking Chinese instead of Japanese. Usually, well, at least if you live in New York, you know the difference between Polish and Hebrew. Like
Right.
New York's very metropolitan. You know what Spanish is. You know what French is. You don't have to be fluent. And he knew. They lied. They were Israeli too. And why did they have fake pest passes? And what were they doing in Liberty State Park? And then the fact that Dominic Suter, the owner of one of their 6 different moving companies, but one of them, he just closes shop on 9/11. That was it. Left furniture stranded and everything, fled back to Israel. And then we get a report from the Miami field office, the FBI. So the FBI has different divisions based on locations. So the FBI field office of Miami, as well as the Orlando DEA office, contact Newark FBI and tell them that one of these moving companies actually was involved in transporting 9/11 hijacker from Florida to New York. And they knew that immediately. 2 of the ones that got celebrating were already on the counterintelligence database. So they had ears and eyes on these people anyway, because as you'll find out, there was this huge operation smuggling in ecstasy. The Israelis are bringing drugs into the United States and keeping tabs. And what they did is rather than building a new network from scratch, they just built upon a pre-existing network and kind of globbed on to that drug smuggling, the DEA groups, which had been spying on the DEA, a portion of which then monitor hijackers, give them logistical support, and protect them from local authorities. And they protected them from electronic communications, eavesdropping. They kept changing their communications, and they complained about this. And it's Israeli companies, Israeli operatives, the whole thing, protecting Al-Qaeda. Of course, you have the supposed pilot of Flight 93 has blood relatives in Israeli espionage that got caught as spies against Hezbollah like months after 9/11. That's Ziad al-Jarrah. Youssef and Ali al-Jarrah get busted. They got another uncle. It's just like so many Israeli footprints all over it. Whenever they move with them. They follow him around when they go to New York. The Israelis go to New York. They're living next to Mohammed Atta. They even had an agent next to his post box. His post box was not the same place as his house. They were monitoring them 100%. And the same thing was going on in the West Coast with Naif al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Midhar, and then later Hani Hanjour, where they gave them an apartment. They got one of them a job. They sent them money. They took care of these guys all the way up into the point where they got on the planes. And the two intermediaries they used, as I mentioned before, is Omar Bayoumi. Another one was Osama Basnan. There's a guy nicknamed Muppet. I reveal his real name in the film because we found that out last year. That information wasn't available until December of 2024. We knew there was a GIT agent there. And it ultimately goes right back to Saudi intelligence. The Saudi intelligence, as I give a background in the film, is so interwoven with the CIA, you can barely separate them. And that the quick history on that is basically after Watergate and the disaster of the Vietnam War, a lot of scrutiny and domestic scrutiny was on the CIA. So they moved their operations offshore. Their money laundering, their black operations, they just got it out of Langley, put it in Riyadh, and they set up a network. The mainstay of it was this bank called BCCI. And they had the Saudi royals and some Pakistanis set up this money laundering network through madrasas and charities, the same thing they'd been doing during, and they used during the Contra affair, for example. They would use these money laundering operations, but they used it in Operation Cyclone to finance early Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets. So these money laundering apparatus already existed prior to 9/11. And it's the exact same individuals. It's not that long a period of time. It's the same people. Prince Bandar, Prince Turki bin Fasil, the same people. And then they got to use Ramzi bin al-Shibh and a bunch of bin Laden's brother-in-laws. And then people like Mohammed Zammar. And then the ones Zawahiri, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Osama bin Laden, blah, 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 blah. But there was a bunch of underlings that people, I feel like, don't know. They will if they watch the movie, that help facilitate this octopus of moving money around. And it's a lot. I mean, Muhammad Atta was straight up wired $100,000 out of Pakistan at the behest of a former ISI general. And that's not illegal because he hadn't done a crime yet. So you are allowed to wire this guy money if you want. And they just be like, I didn't know he was going to be a terrorist. Like, yeah, you did. Yeah. What was it for? You just some student from Germany you really like? Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that happened is like, well, that's not illegal. Should have been. But you can't prove someone knew. They can always play stupid. But most of the money wasn't that direct and concrete. They would give it to intermediaries. And so say they want to give it to the Kurdish mosque in San Diego, and then the Kurdish mosque in San Diego says, oh, I just thought we were helping some new students or, some Muslim immigrants or whatever, and act dumb. The problem with that is going to be that there's spooks all over those organizations. And once they start making phone calls to Al-Qaeda safe house in Yemen, for example, which the NSA knew, which GID knew, and which the CIA knew, none of them act on their own information and none of them share their information with each other. Because the whole point was not to stop 9/11, but to foster it.
I've got to ask, what was the role then of urban moving systems? Was it just simply to spy and blow up the George Washington Bridge? Can you expound on that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, there was a van stopped near the bridge. That doesn't mean the bridge was a target. So, but you have some circumstantial evidence that you can give reasonable speculation on, which is that there was an attack on the World Trade Center in 1993 with a Ryder truck bomb. And in that attack, there was a plan to blow up the Holland Tunnel or one of the bridges, but they never did it because that whole thing got botched. They parked the Ryder truck in the wrong place. Tower didn't fall. And anthrax had been stolen from Fort Detrick in 92. Same individuals. That's not the same anthrax that would get used, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, the fact that you have people in the lab stealing anthrax and they still had access to the lab in 97, 98, 99, then come on, where do you think? It's not from Al-Qaeda. It's not from Iraq. It's genetically traced back to Fort Detrick. We had people stealing from Fort Detrick in the past. You might want to question those people. They didn't. because they already knew the answer. They already knew who sent the anthrax, but the Israelis lied and said they witnessed Al Qaeda getting anthrax at a meeting in Prague from senior Iraqi officials. That's not like a mistake. You can't. Oh, I thought that's what I saw, and what you cannot witness a transfer of anthrax at a meeting that never took place between two parties that didn't have anthrax. It's just a completely made up story. But that's what they went with, and then you look at who then relayed that bogus information to U.S. and the UK. James Woolsey, the former director of the CIA appointed by Epstein client Bill Clinton. And then the first paper is the New York Observer, owned by, at the time, Charles Kushner, before he went to jail. That's Jared Kushner's father.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes in the LA Times and the London Times and da. But they were all quoting the German papers and European papers, or Woolsey himself, or a curveball, whatever the hell they call him. And so they're like, "Oh, I didn't say it. I'm just saying someone said it." But it's really sloppy reporting, because the Czechs immediately came out and said this wasn't true, but the Israelis were steadfast on it. Yeah. Saddam Hussein is working with Al Qaeda, and this got repeated by predictably the same neocons that lie about everything else, the ones that were lying about WMDs in general. So we would not have had a war in Iraq had they not falsely associated Iraq to September 11th attacks. And they is the Israelis. The American media 100% went with it.
Talk about the financing for a moment, because like you said, it is probably one of the most important underlying aspects of 9/11. What intelligence agencies were involved? How was money moved around? And how was it intentionally ignored?
Here's what's interesting is the assumption would be, didn't bin Laden finance 9/11? No, he didn't.
Right.
There wasn't. He couldn't. Even if he had money, and he did, he's a hot potato already. There's eyes on him. He's got a lot of heat. He's like the leader. He's on the run. He can't move money around. They're watching him. And, like, if he were to move money around, it'd be like, well, how did he do that without you knowing? If you already know about the embassy bombings, and so he's already a known terrorist. He can't do anything. Some of his family members were involved, brother-in-laws and such, and a lot of underlings of names of people that you wouldn't know. Like, they're not that recognizable, but they were a network that had already been used in conflicts in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Chechnya, where they're 100% terrorists, but there are terrorists. So if you're killing Russians, it's okay. If you're doing what we want in Yugoslavia, it's okay. If you're doing, there's a look away list. And it's very similar to the Contras in Nicaragua. It's very similar to ISIS in Syria. Nobody thinks that was grassroots now. Everyone knows the Turks, the Israelis, and the Americans fostered, financed, and armed ISIS. Even while publicly condemning it, they absolutely would only ever attack Assad and never attack ISIS. Israel never attacked ISIS. Only the Syrian regime, only the Syrian government. Same thing with Turkey. Like, they'll go after the Kurds, and they would go after anybody but their own faction. Their own faction, Al-Nusra Front, which is now rebranded HDS, and they run the country. And that was a massive, covertly state-financed terrorist operation to overthrow Syria. And the Contras in Nicaragua were 100% armed by the CIA, drugs leaving and guns coming in, pilots trained in Mena, Arkansas. That whole story's been flushed out. We had this huge televised trial of Ollie North and Anthony Poindexter and Weinberg and all these guys. They get pardons and commuted because the head of the operations was Bush Sr., and he ends up becoming president. And they just pardoned them. And what's twisted is the co-chair of the Tower Commission to investigate Iran-Contra was Dick Cheney and Lee Hamilton. And the lead investigator for the 9/11 Commission is also Lee Hamilton. It couldn't be Cheney because he was vice president at the time being investigated, but like his former co-chair of one whitewash is the leader of the next whitewash. And originally they wanted it to be Henry Kissinger, and he actually was there for like a month, and then he resigned. He recused himself. But yeah, you end up with Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton. And there's so many conflicts of interest with these guys. But that's why that commission was a farce. But you didn't have to rely on that. I mean, they did dig up some things after it was undeniable and you'd have to admit it, then they would. So it wasn't totally useless. But the JS, the Joint Inquiry, Senate investigation in 9/11, which spent a lot more money, did dig up names and did have some of this information, and they just kept it classified all the way until like 2015 for national security reasons, whatever. And then when it was unclassified, no one even knew, because nobody even knew that report existed to go look it up, because there's no Alex Jones and stuff, 9/11 commission, they didn't even know there was a Senate investigation. And back then, people just weren't internet savvy enough to go and grab documents. It's funny because now with Twitter, with a slight window of liberation before they reined it back in, people were trying to dig up files on Epstein, JFK, and so on, and going through the archive, and they learned how to do that, and going to NARA, the National Archives and Records, but even 10 years ago, nobody did that. And so it was a way like they can. This is what I need to stress to people: this conspiracy is not hidden. It's not a secret society. It's not the Illuminati. And they do this right in front of your face.
Yep.
They don't even try hiding stuff anymore. Look what they did in Gaza. They just blew up cities, right? They just shoot babies. It gets to the point where they realize it doesn't matter if you know, because you can't do anything.
Well, we're trying to do something, that's for sure. I've got 2 more quick questions on 9/11.
I think it matters when Americans die, but like Palestinians,
right?
What everyone knows, they killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. They killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, thousands of Lebanese. And does the policy change? No.
Okay, so what I understand why Israel would be involved. What is less certain to me is why Saudi Arabia would be involved. Why are they in cahoots with Israel? What is their geopolitical bent working in concert?
No, they're in cahoots with the United States. And that relationship, I know you already know this answer, but I know why you're asking, so I'll tell you. That started in 1976. So in 1973, there was the Yom Kippur War that Israel started, attacking all their neighbors. And as a response to that, what's called the OPEC nations, the most solid part, the belt buckle of that belt was Saudi Arabia. They have the most light crude oil and the largest oil reserves, followed by Iraq at that time. And they all got together and said, we're going to hold oil and gas in the United States. So these huge gas lines in America and stuff, like, we don't have to beat your military. We don't have to compete with you on like your GDP and your money. And we have the oil and we can keep it from you. And they realized they formed a cartel called OPEC, OPEC. And the Americans said, we have to break this cartel. And so all you really need to flip is Saudi Arabia. If you get Saudi Arabia, OPEC fails. And so they brought them in to the fray, to the pre-existing network of Israel and America that had been snapped together after the Kennedy assassination. It's another can of worms. And the Saudi public isn't really on board. I mean, Israel and Saudi Arabia have the common enemy in Iran. So there's a little bit of overlap there. But most of the people there hate the Israelis, don't like ethnic cleansing. They don't like the monarchs either, but they're stuck with them. But when you have a monarchy, you just have to bribe one family. Mm-hmm. They're in charge. It's a dictatorship. So they did. They offered him Bechtel and like all of Saudi Arabia's modern development, sewage, infrastructure stuff come in from these American companies. John Perkins used to call them the jackals. but they get in and they personally benefit. And so you could do all that legally without asking for criminal favors. Of course, you just pay for things, but that's not what they did. They brought him in as an intelligence nexus, and at the time during the Cold War and the fight on communism, a lot of these Muslim radicals really hated the Soviet Union too, because they, in their mind, is atheistic and it challenges religion, and that's why. If you go back and hear the arguments, it's not about an argument against people who don't own private property and all that. No, it's kill a commie for Christ. They're bad because they don't believe in Jesus. That was the slogan in Vietnam: kill a commie for Christ.
Mm-hmm.
How backwards? Kill somebody for Christ is backwards. That's like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought he said love your neighbor as thyself, not kill your neighbors, but that was their thing. The way they got like Christian cannon fodder and Muslim cannon fodder to oppose the Soviet Union was not any complex economic argument. It's they don't believe in God, so they're bad. And that worked for them.
Okay, so last question on 9/11, and this is a little controversial, I think, but I just want to go there for a moment. Okay, so I'm convinced of the Building 7 controlled demolition. Okay, when I
Mm-hmm.
look at when I look at it drop, do you think it's plausible? And if you look at
You
the
ever seen a
testimony,
building fall from fire?
yeah, I mean, I've seen it. Yes, I have, right?
They
But I
drop.
didn't see Building 7 with that inferno, if you will. And so
Right.
when I
Because you
look
only
at
saw the north side in the morning.
Sure. Okay, but when I look at the testimony of firefighters saying that they heard explosions, things like this, and then when I look at it fall into its footprint, I think it's plausible. Okay, and so I understand that your position is that there's enough of the story, whether it's directed energy weapons or controlled demolition, or if they just fell from the planes, right? But there's enough of the story around it. We know who done it and why. The physics are immaterial at this point. But let
Sure.
me ask you this. Do you
But
think
the
it's
physics matter
plausible?
because you sound like a goof if you start
Right.
thinking that people went in and put a bomb on every floor.
But do
There
you think
were
it's
truck
plausible
bombs.
that there were explosives used potentially
Yeah,
to take it
they
down?
found them. They
Yeah,
found trucks full of explosives in World Trade Center 1. So it's reasonable that they had them in World Trade Center 2 if they had them in World Trade Center 1. And you could
sure.
say maybe they had them in Building 7. People don't realize those buildings don't stop on the ground. They have basement levels, parking garages. They went all the way down to a subway. Whole subway was full of smoke. And police found a van packed with explosives. At least one got reported by Pat Dawson, no relation, and Rick Sanchez on 9/11, and the chief of police and the chief of fire department, who I believe died on that day, talked about this. They towed it out to the Church of Dates, which became the sort of makeshift headquarters for the bomb squads and stuff. It was widely reported. So, and that is exactly what they did in 1993. They had a truck bomb. But these
Mhm,
people that think that you can go into an active building full of people and just start slapping C4 on the wall or
mhm,
something are insane. Like, what about squibs? Buildings are mostly air. Between the floors is air. It has to go somewhere. If you look at the Plasco, if you look at Madrid, you look at any of the other like steel buildings that fell or halfway fell, there's always squibs. There cannot not be squibs. That is exactly what a building looks like when it falls from fire too. Except from demolition, it usually goes from the bottom to the top, not the top to the bottom. But you could rig it the other way, whatever. But what we had in the World Trade Centers is a multitude. There's four things. One is the physical impact of a plane. And if you start denying planes, I don't know what to say. Like, just get bent.
We do not deny planes, that's for
Right,
sure.
right. And then you had so that's going to start a fire. The fire is then exacerbated because the fire prevention systems have been sabotaged prior to the being hit by planes. So if the sprinklers don't come on and stuff, you are ensuring maximum damage from the fire. Then in addition to all of that, apparently you have truck bombs in the basement level that went off. One was discovered, and you hear firemen and stuff saying there was, a bomb from below. You have witnesses that said the whole subway was full of smoke. You had the turnstile was burnt, placards and glass broken on the first floor prior to either building falling on film from something going below. And I believe the plan was that the purpose of the truck bomb was to collapse the first floor into the basement levels. Therefore, nobody would be able to get out. And then you'd have a death toll of around 50,000 instead of 3. But as far as building 7 went, you don't need to blow it up with a bomb when it's on fire. All you have to do is not try to put out the fire, and it will fall. And none of the firemen were surprised. Building 6 fell that day. Part of building 5 fell that day. Of course, building 1 and 2 did. Like, no building ever fell from fire. Several other buildings fell that day. That because, yes, they weren't hit by a plane, but they were hit by another building. Building 6 fell because building 1 and 2 fell on it. And part of building 1 fell on building 7. That's why it was on fire in the first place. It wasn't hit by a plane. How'd it catch on fire? Well, it had debris from another skyscraper next to it land on it. And you're right that if you look at the north side of building 7 at 9:20 in the morning, which is what Alex Jones does, and say pockets of fire, hey, this one black guy said this thing, blah, 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 it doesn't look like some huge inferno. But if you go to the other side of the building and look at the south side, at 4:30 in the afternoon, every single floor is on fire. The southwest corner is missing, and the firemen on the ground are all saying that one's next. That's gonna go. Nobody thought that building was gonna survive. But they don't let you see that footage. They cherry pick it out and be like, look, it's barely on fire. That means they went in and rigged it with explosives that day, and Larry Silverstein said pull it, and blah, 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 blah. I hate defending Larry Silverstein. He's a piece of shit, friend of Netanyahu. Da, da, da. He did not. He tried to claim double insurance. He'd say it was 2 separate attacks. They told him to pound sand. He sued for 2 different 3 million installment, 3.5 that he wanted. He ends up getting 4.5 in a settlement, not until like 2007. The insurance companies told him to eat it. What he said when Alex Jones is saying pull it and saying that's an industry term to pull down the building, demolition, blah, blah, blah. That's not what he said. 325 firemen died on 9/11. They died because they went into the towers and the towers fell. And so the full quote in full context is this. Well, there had already been so much loss of life already, meaning the 325 dead firemen. He's talking to the chief of the new fire chief. So we, meaning me and the fire department, decided the safest thing to do would be to pull it. So we made the decision to pull, and we pulled out of the building and watched it burn. Pull just means we pulled the firemen out of the building because so many other firemen had died in the other buildings, and they let it go. And this is like part of his problem on getting insurance is like, well, you didn't attempt to put it out. They're like, well, that was not unreasonable because so much of the fire department had been physically destroyed fighting the other two, and we didn't want to lose anyone else. And so they let it burn. And if you let a building burn, what do you think? It just burns for infinity? It'll fall. Of course it will.
I think that's what's so great about your documentary is because it then goes into the plausible theory that the fire suppression systems were tampered with, and you can prove that, right?
Yeah, well,
that was the most compelling argument I've heard, that it wasn't controlled demo. I was leaning it probably was. I don't claim to know, but I also think the psychopaths that organize this, they want all these crazy conspiracy theories. They want people blaming it on D.
Yeah, they want to deny airplanes. They want to deny hijackers or say they're still alive and autopilot and all this stuff. Because I'll give you 2 quick, like you mentioned, the Pentagon. Like, the Pentagon was hit by a plane. It's got a plane-sized hole in it. It's got debris from the plane in it. It's got the passengers in it. It's got the DNA from the passengers at Walter Reed. Clearly hit by a plane. It does not go through 6 reinforced walls. They're looking at an above photo of the Pentagon that has the rings. But those rings are on the upper floors. The bottom floor doesn't have rings. It's just 2 rings. And it only went through 2 walls. It went through the wall that it hit, and then the landing gear made a hole, probably 12 feet or so in the C ring. But there is no A and B between that on the lower floors. So a plane busted through 2 walls and some sheetrock. It's not that impressive. They want to act like how can you be an architect or engineer? Your opinion doesn't matter, because if your premise is wrong, your conclusion is irrelevant. It's not hitting the upper floors. It hit the first floor. And they used to lie and act like, oh, look, a plane had to fit in this tiny hole. And they're showing the exit hole, not the entrance hole. And like, you assholes are doing this on purpose. That's the exit hole. And that's caused by the landing gear, which is made of steel, by the way, because there's broken landing gear sitting in front of the hole. Like, duh. As far as the entrance hole, it's about 90 feet across. The wings are full of fuel. They blow up upon impact. And they were like, well, how come there's no cameras? No. That, I'll go through it again, but the affidavit about the 87 cameras is talking about cameras of 9/11, not of the Pentagon. And almost all of those were camera recordings of New York. As far as the Pentagon goes, almost all the cameras at the Pentagon are facing the entrances and exits for people going in and out of the building. They don't have a camera sitting on the lawn focused on some random wall with a bush, waiting for something to hit the wall. Like, the cameras are pointed at the doors where people going in and out of the building. And most of the other cameras are in the building, in the hallways and stuff, to track you once you're in the building. They're not filming by the heliport just randomly at some window with some bricks. Like, the only reason you have 5 frames is because a camera way back that filmed cars coming in to park where the lever is and stuff kind of caught it serendipitously, the plane hitting. It's 5 frames because it's not designed to film a plane going 350 miles an hour across the parking lot. It's film designed people walking in and out of the building, maybe slowly parking their car. But you don't need to have it on high def film to know it was a plane. You've got like 415 witnesses because it flew over I-95 and 495 in Virginia. That's a lot of people in there every day. Mm-hmm. Everybody saw a plane go to the Pentagon. Nobody saw it fly away from the Pentagon. And it did not turn invisible like a Wonder Woman jet. Like, it clearly hit the Pentagon. And the debris of the fucking plane is this is like, I don't even need to do it. It was hit by a plane. But here's why it's important to admit that it's hit by a plane. So not just so you don't look retarded. It's, if you don't have the plane, then you no longer have Nawif Al-Hazmi, Khalid Al-Midhar, and Hanjor and stuff on the plane. And if that erases the hijackers, now you no longer have the paper trail of Osama Bassanan and Bayoumi, Noweed Dalket, and Bandar Bush that were giving them money in California, and that all disappears because you're acting like there's no plane. If you don't have plane and hijackers in Flight 93, then the fact that Zaid al-Jarrah has first cousins in Israeli espionage and acted as a mole that never even got on the plane, he bailed out. All the phone calls say there are 3. They mentioned 3 hijackers, not 4. The only evidence that al-Jarrah was on that plane is they claim they found his passport, which is sure, whatever. I think they had that in their pocket. But oh, look, it's been burned a little bit. So how convenient. His face and name are still there, whatever. But they'll say, oh no, there's no cell phone calls in 2001. Like, dude, it's not from a cell phone. It's from the airphone. And airphones are designed, that's why you have them, to make calls from a plane. And the witnesses on the airphone say there's 3 hijackers. Somebody's in the cockpit. And then guess what? We have the black box, which was played in the Moussaoui trial. And Zaid al-Jarrah is not piloting the plane because even the other hijackers are calling him Saeed al-Ghamdi, the guy that was al-Ghamdi does not sound like al-Jarrah either. They definitely know who's piloting the plane. Al-Jarrah, the 4th person, never speaks, not even Allah Akbar or anything at the end, nothing. It's just those 3 guys. So did he get knocked out right in the beginning and then they had to do an audible? No. He was never there. And the fact that he had family in Israeli espionage, this is what happened. Al-Jarrah was a mole inside Al-Qaeda and bailed at the last second. And then they're already on the plane and they have to do it. Because they were down 2 men, because Moussaoui couldn't get a visa and al-Jarrah bailed, is why the passengers were able to take that plane down. And they'll deny that too. They're like, oh no, it was shot out of the air. No. Anything to avoid the paper trail that goes back to intelligence agencies. They just want to act like Bush did it by himself or something. Like just America did this all. They were rigging it up with bombs and nanothermite or whatever. And they just... You cannot get your foot in the door to talk about the real event and what happened, who covered it up, 9/11 Commission, the associating it to Iraq, and all that disappears. We have people obsessed with physics, none of whom are physicists. They were like, well, this architecture engineer said this and that. Like, no, they didn't. You had a group call itself Architects and Engineers from 9/11, and they went around and browbeat and harass people. And anyone that said, they said, do you support an independent investigation of 9/11? And anyone who said yes, they're like, see, they agree with our conclusions. Well, that's not true. They just agreed that, yeah, why not? You should have an independent investigation of 9/11, of course. That does not mean they agree to that. And they finally did come around. It was not until like 2017, a guy named Chandler, I forgot his first name, they finally admitted a plane hit the Pentagon. It took them 16 years to realize, okay, a plane hit the Pentagon. That's how far in our own end zone we are, that 24 years after 9/11, you still have people arguing whether or not there were airplanes. And
Yeah, I
this is
think
why
that
we
that's
lose.
totally wild
This is why
and
we
unfortunate.
lose.
Right.
Is
I do want to, okay, so I want to probe one question really quickly. So the uninterruptible autopilot, okay. So I think that it's really compelling that all of those witnesses saw the plane hit the Pentagon. That's why I always thought it was a plane, despite the lack
the
of,
plane's still in the
credible
Pentagon.
footage.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But so the uninterruptible autopilot piece, I think, is plausible because it would allow hijackers to create, do these difficult maneuvers that would allow them to hit the plane, the Twin Towers, etc. Where
It's
that
not
sort
difficult.
of gets wonky, though, is why wasn't it then employed for the fourth plane that crashed in PA? Should that not have been impossible for, people to take over
Right.
the hijackers or
Well, if
whatever?
it's on
The
autopilot,
uninterruptible autopilot would have
right.
gone through and allowed it to happen. So do you
Even if
think
the
it's
hijackers weren't
plausible?
there, it would have worked. And yet
Right.
that plane does go down because they were piloting the plane. It's not a difficult maneuver. Like hitting the Pentagon is super easy. It's like you're landing on a runway, which planes do thousands of times a day, except you don't put the landing gear down and you don't decelerate. You just run into the building. It's very easy to crash a plane. It's actually harder to hit the World Trade Centers. And one of them did, Al-Shehhi kind of tilted his. Atta got it dead on. Boom, right in the middle. And that's what they practice. But those are some pretty big buildings. You line it up and then you gun it. But you could have clipped it and it could have gone wrong. And maybe 93 was going to double up on the World Trade Center. They weren't sure whether they're going to fall from one shot or not. We don't know where that plane was going. They all said the White House to the Capitol building. They said that day. Like, how could you know that? You don't know where that was going. They said they were headed back to New York. So if they make an announcement and say we're headed back to New York, and then the plane turns south, the passengers are going to know that's not where New York is. What's going on? If you're going to make an announcement to say, oh, we're going to do an emergency landing in Virginia or something, then oh, okay. Like if that's where you're going toward DC, but they said they're going back to New York. So maybe that was going to hit one of the World Trade Centers, twice, or maybe it was going to hit Building 7. We don't know what it was going to hit. Could have hit the UN building, could hit anything up there. Because why would you make the announcement that we're going back to the airport in New York? Like, because then the plane turns around like, oh, he said we're going back for some reason. You can't then go, like all of them know, like that New York's that way, not that way. So that is a weird thing. And maybe he just said the wrong thing. Now we do have like a poem written. This is, before the event, where it says we have that. My interpretation is 2 military and 2 government targets. And I think they said 2 civilian, 2 military. I said, but sometimes the plans change. Like we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Because they were going to hit the Sears Tower at one point. They were going to do a West Coast attack. They're all a bunch of different plans they ended up not doing. But they called it like the faculty of law, the faculty of learning. They had little codes. So 19 students, 4 exams, so 4 targets. Regards to the professor, which means Bin Laden. 2 universities, which is the 2 military targets. So people think, well, depending on what? Because you get the World Trade Center, you get the other World Trade Center. I don't see any problem with just hitting the Pentagon twice. It doesn't have to be Langley to just hit the Pentagon again. And that's very likely. In fact, Hunter screwed up because he was at too high an altitude. So he did a whole loop. And this is not some corkscrew thing. This is miles long loop. so that it could come back at a lower altitude and then dive the plane in and hit. And when the kooks are saying he's doing this Top Gun maneuver, no, he wasn't. It's way worse than that. He's doing a giant slow circle around DC and the Pentagon, and they still didn't shoot it down. And you have Dick Cheney and we have Norman Mineta, the transportation secretary's testimony saying, you know, the young man said the plane is 30 miles out, 20 miles out. The order still stand. He whipped his neck around and said, you've all heard this, right? 30 miles from what? Because that's not Flight 93. It's Flight 77. And they even asked, Lee Hamilton asked them, you're talking about Flight 77 at the Pentagon. He said, I'm talking about the flight that hit the Pentagon. That they had eyes on it. They saw it, you know, like it got really close and then, oh, it went away again. It goes in a circle, comes back a second time, but, you know, lower so it can make it the shot. So they had 2 chances to shoot that down and they didn't. And the order still stands means it's a commercial airliner. So we don't have a habit of shooting down our own planes. But after 2 had hit New York already, you can do that. But they don't issue the order until after it's connected. And it seemed like Cheney was already knew what it was supposed to hit and do. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to shoot it down. I don't see the point. Like, I feel like hitting New York would have been enough to get your wars and everything else. But they wanted it as big as possible. And, you know, the Pentagon, by hitting the Pentagon, you're going to piss off all those military families, all those contractors stuff. They're going to be ready. Budgets are going to explode. You're going to get new air defense system. But there was not a complex maneuver done. And saying that covers up for the fact that he did a very non-complex maneuver that should have been super easy to intercept that plane, and it wasn't done. And that's, I know there was kind of an exercise with NORAD and all, but man, the Pentagon, there's F-16s all over Virginia and DC, like, and in Maryland. You don't got to fly from North Dakota or something. Like, it's right there, and nothing was scrambled.
Wild.
I would talk to you about 9/11 all day. Mark, go ahead.
I got one more, Otago. So how widespread do we know how widespread the warning was disseminated, and do we have any like hard evidence that there were warnings?
Yeah, I mean, 2 guys came forward that we know of that said, hey, I was told not to go to work. 2 Jewish guys. How many other people got the message and didn't say anything? And that doesn't mean because they're part of it. It's just like they're just scared. Most people don't want to talk to the feds or spooks, you know, and have their phones go in their life turn. So they just were quiet, you know. But it could have been a case where they had the same name as someone else, or someone was just warning Jews. It wasn't bin Laden, I can promise you that. That was warning random Jewish boys not to go to work. But the guys had no idea why they were messaged. They're like, I don't know. I received this message and I'm glad I did because I didn't go to work, but I don't know who sent it. I don't know why they told me, but they were happy about it. But it's an Israeli message service. It was like AIM back in the day. You remember, what was it called? American, what was that? Instant Message.
AOL?
American Instant Message. No, AIM. American Instant Message, I think it was. Derivative of AOL, yeah. Yeah, it was America Online. They had this thing called AIM. So a lot of Americans use AIM, but Israelis use Otago. And then you look at the connections between Otago and Hollinger, and it goes right back to 9/11 Commission staffers and stuff. But, well, commissioners, actually. They made this lie. Hollinger owns the Jerusalem Post, for example. And on its board of directors, you have Fred Fielding and Richard Pearl and Henry Kissinger. So that's just as bad as it gets. But the Jerusalem Post put out this story saying like 4,000 Jews didn't go to work. It's not true. And then all these internet racists are like, oh, the Jews, like all of them didn't go to work. And Larry didn't go to work. And Lowry didn't go to work. Silverstein didn't go to work. They never went to work. They own it. You know, that Jews died on 9/11. Lots of Jews died in the World Trade Center. That it was a story to cover up the Otago story. So when like it is true, a couple of guys who, yes, they were Jewish, said they used an Israeli instant message servicer and they were warned about the attack. that should have been investigated. Okay, let's do digital forensic and figure out who sent this. That never happened. Instead, it was a story of, neo-Nazis are saying no Jews went to work on 9/11. 9/11 is being blamed on the Jews, is blood libel, blah, blah, blah. And this is what Israel does. Like, anytime Israel gets caught in anything, they equate criticism of their state or their state's actions to all Jews everywhere in the world. It's just ridiculous. But that it works.
Agreed.
So I guess it's not
Agreed.
ridiculous. It works. Yeah.
I would sit here and talk to you all day about this stuff. Let's ask like one or two more questions here, okay? So, so let's talk about how 9/11, I think, was carried out to perpetuate Greater Israel, just like October 7th.
Yeah.
So with that, we have, these greater aims of Greater Israel. But right now we have this ceasefire, right? So we have the ceasefire. It doesn't seem like much of a ceasefire. It has, right. It's already been broken, as is Israel's MO. They break ceasefires all the time. They also have these escape clauses from the ceasefire terms, like providing back all of the deceased bodies. Okay, so they're already saying that that's grounds to start a war again.
Totally
that Hamas
disarmed.
must disarm.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. They're not going to do that. So how are we set up to fail here? What are the next steps you think are going to come?
Israel has fostered ISIS groups. They're all throughout Gaza, and they kill people and stuff. And then they'll go around on X where they're paying people $7,000 a pop. Be like, see, this is Hamas. The latest grift was the last 20 hostages were released, and Laura Liar and the rest of them all said at the same time the exact same phrase: "There's no female hostages. I bet they got raped to death by Hamas." Blah 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 blah. There are no female hostages because those were the first hostages released in other exchanges. Mm-hmm. If you go back to November of 2023, when 105 of the hostages were released, mostly women and children, that's when almost all of them were released. And there was another 7 women released back in January. So there weren't any women hostages to exchange, and there hadn't been for a long time, because they in the talks they did, like, okay, let our female prisoners out, we'll let your female prisoners out. Israel could have gotten all the hostages back on October 9th.
Yep.
By doing a prisoner swap, or just by not invading Gaza. And they chose ethnic cleansing instead. Then I think almost half, maybe more, of the Israelis that died on October 7th were killed by other Israelis in the Hannibal Directive. You look at all these burned cars and these towns that have been hit by tank fire. That's not Hamas. They don't have Hellfire missiles and helicopters and tanks. The IDF did that. They did that to other Israelis.
What do you say to people that say there was no genocide because the population of Gaza has increased? I believe that's insane, but I see it all over the place.
Oh, that's so retarded. It's so stupid. It's like people mix up genocide with extermination, because about the only genocide they know of is of Native Americans. And there were Native American tribes that were 100% wiped out. Like, we have a place called the Caribbean. The Caribbeans are completely gone. All of them. 100%. That's extermination. You don't have to reach extermination levels for it to be a genocide. And if a genocide is being done, you don't wait till it's finished to call it a genocide. Then it's too late. You say there's a genocide going on, like they're ethnically cleansing people by the thousands. It's a genocide. And it's a legal term. Just like insanity is a legal term. Like, legally, that is a genocide. Culturally, genocide is a physical genocide. It was a genocide. And they'll say, well, okay, they had babies. So they would have had a lot more. And you've not been killing them cyclically every year. I'd argue that the Nakba is a genocide in the sense that you stole their cities and you relocated a population, hundreds of thousands, nearly 1 million people. That was a genocide. Some of them may live somewhere else on their reservation in Gaza, whatever, that then gets peppered with settlements, racial colonies. By law, only Jews can live there. Like, it is set up by race. I don't think Jews are a race, but they do. So it is, if they say it is. And they have color-coded license plates in the West Bank, for example. Jews can drive on the road. No one else is allowed. They can go here. You cannot. They can own this property. You cannot. They can put a fence over you in Hebron and dump the trash on your head. It is a racial apartheid. I would argue that it was ethnic cleansing in Cast Lead and Pillar of Defense and the March for Peace, where the snipers would just go out there and shoot them every Friday. And all their previous operations where they'd kill thousands or they'd kill hundreds, it's ethnic cleansing. And the fact that you have a population that lives in prison-like conditions, they don't have an airport, they don't have a seaport, they can't control their own sewage, they can't control their own electric facilities, they don't run their water facilities. They would build them. They know how. Israel will blow them up. And then they would have to buy electricity from Israel, and rather than just producing it themselves, which then Israel can just turn it off, turn it on whenever they want as a means of control. It gets to the point of genocide when you're killing them by the tens of thousands, and in this case, way past that, hundreds of thousands. There's only 2.2 million to start with. So if you kill 500,000 people, that's genocide. And like, eventually, yeah, their population will grow again. Eventually, but it would have been triple that had you not killed, a third of them or whatever. It's so stupid. Be like, well, they still exist, so it's not a genocide. It is a genocide. And another thing they did is scholasticize. They blow up you saw this in Syria too, where they're blowing up archaeological artifacts and things. They're erasing their history so they can replace it with Jewish mythology, which is definitely mythology. There was no King David. There was no King Solomon. These are totally like made up characters. No Noah's Ark. None of that stuff happened. Adam and Eve. It's an allegory. It's not literal, unless you're a dispensationalist weirdo. It's not history. So anyone outside of the religion agrees that's not historical. So, but they're just going to make it up. Whereas the Syrian and Canaanite and Phoenician and all that, and Egyptians, that's a real history, real archaeological record. We have very good record of all the pharaohs and things, all that's real. We don't have a record of the stories in the Old Testament. And so, but they're going to replace it by just saying, well, no one has a record of anything. And then they'll probably fake it. So you have scholasticide going on. They targeted professionals. So why they're bombing all these hospitals and things, they're wiping out doctors and nurses, because that takes an entire lifetime to produce one doctor. A baby's got to have a long education and go through med school. And if you wipe them out, there may be none left. They bombed every hospital. 37, boom, gone, all of them. They bombed the churches, they bombed the mosques, they bombed agriculture, and a lot of the people that died in Gaza died from starvation, or they died from disease related to malnourishment, because usually you die of a disease before you actually starve to death. You die of something else because your body can't fight it. That's what happened in the concentration camps in Poland. They'll say, well, this many people didn't get gas. I'm like, well, yeah, a lot of them died from disease, but they wouldn't have if they weren't starving, and they shouldn't have even been in the camp. So you can't be like, they didn't die this way, they died this other way. Whatever, it's still their fault. Like, I don't get the hair splitting stuff to defend Nazis. Like, they shouldn't have been in the camp. So whatever.
Right. But Ryan, you've been on Press TV, I think is like fantastic. I think when I look at documentaries of North Korea and Iran, I think the people there are beautiful and worth fighting for and preserving. How do we stop the war with Iran? How do we agitate to, begin to bring the Zionist occupied government that we have here in the United States down?
I legally must say Kim Jong-un is a horrible person, and North Korea is bad at everything. Read between the lines. They're terrible. I am saying that in a chair in South Korea, that North Korea is awful. I don't like anything they do. As for preserving Iran, yeah, I mean, I've been on Press TV hundreds of times. It is an ancient culture. It is part of world history. It's something that should be preserved. There's no reason to go to war in Iran. They're not building a nuclear bomb. So what if they were? It's not a threat to the United States. It's not in U.S. interest. But Israel is going to drag America into war with Iran because that's the last vestige of resistance to Greater Israel. You wipe out Iran, Yemen can't stand on its own. Hezbollah can't stand on its own. And Israel will pour right in. They'll annex more of Syria. They'll annex a piece of Lebanon. They'll take Jordan, and they'd like the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. That's not going to be that easy to do, though. Egypt cannot sustain a protracted war, but they can do a defensive war. Lebanon's in a simpler situation. But without Iran, it would be a matter of time. And that's the last piece in the way if you're Netanyahu, who I call the Antichrist.
I thought it was Peter Thiel, but we'll see.
I think Netanyahu is the Antichrist.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with you.
Peter Thiel's more like the little snaky advisor in the shadow. Yeah. He's like Jafar. Hey, if you look at that Epstein map that I made 7 years ago, Peter Thiel is right there, right in the middle.
Sure.
Right under Epstein. Yeah.
Damn. What do you give Trump
before it was cool? What's that?
What do you give Trump for a grade so far? Now, I mean, maybe he orchestrated the ceasefire, but in Ukraine, I'm understanding he's offering the UN a bunch of weapons. He's offering Ukraine Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah,
what do you think of Trump?
I don't think much of him, but you have to compare it to where we were. Under Genocide Joe, they would just kept killing. They would kill them all. He wouldn't care. Under Genocide Joe, we didn't even talk to Russia. I don't have a lot of faith in Steve Witkoff or any of that. Trust me. But we didn't even talk to him at all. So it's foregone conclusion, full support for Zelensky. That's all it was under Joe Biden. So it really can't get worse than Anthony Blinken running the country. So at least with Donald Trump, you have an above 0% chance of getting something done. So it is better than the absolute worst. But of course he's making mistakes. Like Witkoff should not be there. We don't need people like Huckabee and Rubio. His whole cabinet's a bunch of Christian Zionists. Like you don't need to be giving Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. That is an idiotic step. Hasn't done it yet, threatened it. Here's how you end that conflict. You'd go to Zelensky and say, no more money and weapons for you. You're going to have to cede all the territory in the Donbass and salvage what you have left before you lose Odessa. Because if you don't do that, sure, you can make a war of attrition and pump some more money and guns, like take your money and throw it in the fireplace. It will keep you warm. That is a very expensive way to stay warm. Like you can do that. And it doesn't, and in the end, they're still going to lose all that territory and more men and more money. So it's a sunken fallacy. But the people in the EU are just hell bent. They act like Russia's going to take over all of Europe. Russia cannot even cross the Dnieper River, much less the Atlantic, and hit the US or something, or the English Channel, or what. They have no ambition in annexing Poland, Germany, none. They want what they stated, Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbass, which used to be part of Russia anyway. So was Crimea. They don't need Kiev. They don't need. The question is going to be Kharkiv. I don't know what to do with that. It's not my problem. But the U.S. needs to disconnect itself, and Europe can do what Europe does. But without America, that war ends. And so Trump could just say, "Look, NATO, we've paid for this hundreds of billions of dollars. You're not getting anywhere. You're losing territory every day. You're losing manpower. This whole thing was started with your own coup d'etat and the Maidan coup and slaughtering Russians and banning the language. Da, 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 da. Zelensky doesn't have elections. He's there illegally. Why are you propping this guy up? You know, they should have elections in Ukraine and the new leadership to say, look, we're going to end the war. And a realistic scenario would say that the oblast that had a referendum and seceded from Ukraine are part of the Russian Federation. Too bad. You try and make relations with them. You know, you speak some same language or so, and just keep what you have and try and keep Odessa so that you don't become a landlocked country. Crimea's gone. Kherson's gone. You could argue about Kherson. You really can't argue about Crimea or the whole Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk. They're gone. And the portion of Kherson below the river is gone because they're going to have a land bridge to Crimea. Hey, it's how it is. Kiss it goodbye. And those people will never reunite with Ukraine after all this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be part. Even if you were to somehow take it over, then you'd have a resistance movement, an insurgency for the next 50 years. And that's why Russia is not going to go across the river and take Kiev or anything to the west of that, because they'd have to occupy and for another 50 years of that. It's like the US got stuck in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years. They sat in Iraq, and really from Gulf War I all the way, they had bases there. We just now took 2 bases out of Iraq this year. The war was in 2003.
Yeah.
And that was under enormous pressure. And I believe we'd still be there if they weren't planning to go to war in Iran. They just don't want an easy target.
Ryan, I've got one last question for you, and it's something that has just been churning through my brain for a long time. Gonzalo Lira spoke about this before he was killed in Ukrainian prison.
Yeah,
but
a friend of mine.
Yeah, it's super sad what happened to him. I was really listening to him a lot during the thick of that war and the outbreak and what have you. Okay, so he mentioned this historic hatred against Russia because of the Pale of Settlement. I think this is like a black hole in our history when we understand the Pale of Settlement and what happened when the Pale of Settlement was fractured and the Bolshevik Revolution ensued, what have you. What are your thoughts on the historic hatred of Russia, of the Jewish people, because of the Pale of Settlement? Does that animate what's going on?
I think you can go that far back, the partition of Poland, and that the Pale of Settlement is sort of that's Western Ukraine, Crimea, is where a lot of Jews were kind of corralled into this one area, and they could do their trade and stuff with each other, but they couldn't go outside of the Pale. But I would argue that more recent history, like Holodomor, is why people hate Russia, or the Soviet Union and the annexation in World War II. There's more fresh on the mind conflicts that are driving this than the Pale. But as far as if you really want to get into that, would there have been a World War I without that? I don't think so.
Right.
But that's a different argument than talking about today's war between Ukraine and Russia. That's more on recent conflicts.
Maybe for our next show, we dive into the Pale of Settlement.
Just do a World War I show, because I feel like nobody knows what the hell happened in World War I.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I wish Lear was here. I wish he could. Right. I really missed my conversations with that guy, and I'm glad at least he had children before he was murdered, and so his genes are passed on, and he's a
brave and brilliant man.
Videos if his channel's still around.
Right.
He knew they were gonna kill him.
Yeah,
he knew it. He was like, they're torturing me in prison. They're gonna kill me. I'm gonna make a break for it for Hungary. And I think he called Larry Johnson that day, and I want to say McAdams. I know he called Larry Johnson, and he actually called my Skype, and I didn't answer it. I thought I'll just call him later.
Yeah,
and then I couldn't.
Yep, that's where things start to get personal, and that's why I'm very thankful for everything that you're doing.
My eyes are watering because of the wet macular degeneration. It's not like I'm sad about this stuff, but I talk about this stuff all the time. That's not what
I know,
it is.
man.
Yeah. So
dude,
know.
You are an amazing person, and I'm so glad to see your trajectory as well, because I mean, you were one of the most censored people, and now I feel like you are having a raging comeback, and I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, I flatlined on Twitter. I got 306,000, but I've had that for like a month. It doesn't go up or down.
Throttled. You don't come into my feed. It's
I never. I'm not in anybody's feed.
It's such bullshit. If you got another minute, I'd like to hear your thoughts. And I've been reading what you're saying, Kirk.
Like I made this giant 9/11 movie that all these people watched on Substack, and it didn't move the needle on Twitter at all. That's weird,
right?
Yeah, it's definitely people get throttled. And so someone's like, "Oh, I have this, I have that." I was like, "Yeah, but it's just all about algorithmic favoritism. I just cut it off, and you're stuck." They did that when I was at 199. I sat at 199,000, only reason I remember is like, oh, I'm almost at 200,000. This is neat, whatever. It just sat there. And what's going on? What's going on?
Yeah, so it's still not free speech. What do you think? So was it Trantifa or did lapel Mike blow up Kirk?
Trantifa, Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk. Everything's not JFK. I was like,
Right.
God damn, you got a guy on the roof with a gun. This isn't rocket surgery. Though I'll say this, there was a plot to do this because there were a bunch of people on Reddit and Discord, that's where they all live, saying, just wait till tomorrow, something big's going down with Charlie Kirk. Like a lot of them knew it was going down. There's all this false reporting on it. Like there's a getaway plane. None of that shit is true. Like there was no searches on Google Trends, for example, on July 14th. You can check it yourself. They just bank on you not doing it. They take a screenshot. They just made up. You can edit those. And they're making this narrative, and it doesn't say anything. They'll say he was shot from behind. They say there was a trap door. They say exploding microphone. They'll say, okay, he was shot from the front, but it was a different gun or a different person or something, anything other than a faggot on the roof. That's all it was.
I think it's not unlike 9/11 where they want conspiracy theories here.
They do. They want you to say it's Israel stuff because that it's like, the next time someone says something's Israel, they'll go, remember that?
Sure.
You're taking it's called a shit sandwich. You put it out there because someone like Candace Owens, who's got a big audience, is based, and she's done good and bad. Like she defended the Tates, I agree with that. She defended Harvey Weinstein, I don't agree with that. She thinks Macron's wife's a man, I don't agree with that. She had 3 kids. It's really stupid. She's agnostic on the shape of the earth. I think that's ridiculous. The earth is round. I've been around it.
Right.
Like she says some dumb stuff sometimes, but she's not a liar. She says what she thinks is true, and sometimes she gets things wrong. But these charlatans are using her by feeding her false stories, which she just like reports with no filter, and then she has to go back and go, actually, that wasn't true. But this other new thing is, and it's just the newest bullshit, And it's not. They want to discredit her because she came out hard finally for Palestine. And this is a woman that gleefully went with Charlie Kirk to moving the embassy to Jerusalem, like was a full-on Zionist, Daily Wire, all that crap.
Mm-hmm.
And she's come around. So good for her for coming around. But I think you deserve like way more praise for someone like Anna Kasparian, who's been right for 20 years on this issue.
Right.
That's who you should listen to and give attention to. People like her, Norman Finkelstein, Grant F. Smithy, people that never were a Zionist, never fell for this crap, didn't need a red pill or whatever. Because they just never fell for it. That's who you ought to listen to on these things. But these I'm not going to name more people, but there's people in Candace's circle and stuff, and they like want to be me. They want to be like, oh yeah, I'm the super research dude, and I figured out this conspiracy. But if there isn't a conspiracy, you can't just invent one.
Right.
Tyler shot him on the roof with that gun. Like, oh, he said weird stuff like vehicle, total cop talk.
Sure.
That's gamer talk too. And here's the thing about that. If that's fake and he has a trial and he isn't suicided before his trial, all his defense attorney has to do is subpoena the cell phone records. And if that conversation is not on there, case dismissed. It's on there because he did confess. He did it. He's on the fucking roof with a gun. You can see him climb down. Like, I don't see the gun. It has a towel wrapped around it, so it looks like a sweater or something. It's a black towel wrapped around the rifle. His own father, his own mother, his own family believes it. They encouraged him to turn himself in. He did it. He has 2 boyfriends. They all focused on Lance Twiggs, the transgender game addicted weirdo. And he had another one who did underage furry art. It's not real people though. It's like artwork, but it's practically with now that's so interesting thing with AI and stuff. Like this cartoon, which is like so realistic, it looks like a person, isn't actually real. It's just art. So it's not. There's no child in there, but I think to the mind, to the brain, it's doing the same amount of damage. It looks like a kid to me. But anyway, there's this Red Ruckus dude that was making underage furry porn, and these guys were perpetually online and gaming constantly. And I've talked with people that went to high school with Tyler, for example. They called them Reddit kids. Like that, it's a Reddit kid. That's how they determine.
Yeah.
And you know, you get a big pat on the back if you were constantly out there witch hunting for against racism, sexism, pick a ill, you know, that you get a lot of, it's like a positive feedback loop. Like, yeah, because it's an unequivocal bad in American society. You know, racism's like the worst thing ever. Hitler's bad because he was racist, not the not all the violence, it's the racist part. They need that because we're all guilty of all the violent stuff. The Allies killed civilians, they tortured, they bombed cities. What makes you Hitler unique is this, you know, Aryan racism stuff. So it's like drilled into school kids' head, like that's the worst thing in the world. I don't agree with racism, but it's not the, it's like pretty low on my list. It's like if someone's bad at math. I'm like, you're bad at math? Oh, well, all right. You know, oh, you're racist? I'm not. It's fine. You know, it doesn't matter to me. But they act like if somebody's racist, that means they're violent. And that's often not true. Like people can believe one race is better than another and still get along fine and whatever. I don't know. Like we all think genders have no soul. I mean, we can agree on that. Like, but it's just silly. Like the level of identitarian politics where fighting racism, where that problem is as resolved as it's ever going to be. It's the majority of people aren't racist, and you're like looking for it everywhere where it doesn't exist. It reminds me of the Scarface experiment. You heard of that? It's a psychology thing where they put a scar on people's foreheads, like you know, with makeup and stuff, like movie prop or whatever. They put a big scar on their head. They say, like, don't, you know, go around and report your reactions. See if people treat you differently because they're looking at your scar. Like we want to see if there's a pretty privilege, ugly privilege. There definitely is a pretty privilege. But these people went around and doing that. What they didn't tell is half of the participants, they put the scar on and they took it off, but they didn't tell them they took it off. And they still reported back that people were prejudiced to them because of their scar, but they didn't have a scar. But what happened was they're self-conscious about thinking they had a scar, and they interpreted all the interactions of any slight bad or ill. Oh, it's because of my scar. And that's what you have when you beat into people's head that racism's everywhere. Then they're going to experience it like, I experience racism every day. It's because I'm black. Or because I'm gay, or because I'm this, or because of whatever the thing is. And it isn't. It's because it's in your mind. Like people treat other people like shit all the time. You can't chalk that up to some ism constantly. It usually isn't the case. But that was Tyler's group. Like they thought Charlie Kirk was a fascist because he doesn't believe in DEI. He's a fascist because he supported fascists in Israel, but that's not what they meant. They thought he was like hated black people, hated trans people, hated gay people, and he didn't. He thought they could all convert to Christianity and then not go to hell. But he had no problem with black people at all. He did kind of have a problem with being gay, but he just could from a religious point of view. But his idea was just like, don't be gay then.
I think what's coming out of the Kirk assassination is the reflexive response to question Israel. And to your point, we don't want that exploited in a way that, you know, future events, then, you know, people question, oh, it must be Israel fraudulently, or, you know,
well, they think he rejected $150 million. He didn't. Netanyahu can't offer TPUSA money. It's a nonprofit American organization. If he was going to do that, he'd have to launder it through American Jews. And there is no record of Charlie refusing money from American Jews. They have the opposite, where they quit giving money to him, but there's no example of him refusing to take money from them.
Right.
And the fact that they reduced their donations isn't that big a deal. And like Robert Shillman no longer gave $2 million. He only gave $1 million. But that's not uncommon on an election year. They always give more than the year after. They all did that. It's nothing that it's whatever. Charlie Kirk and everything he ever said or did in public was Zionist. What he said in private about some Jew donor or whatever, Maybe, but I'll tell you this: even if Israel was going to kill Charlie Kirk, they're not going to put a Mossad agent on the roof and shoot him. They're going to farm that out to expendables, and the most perfect
I think that's the
expendable
theory
is
here, because if you
Antifa.
look at Israel, they have a track record like Sirhan potentially being a Manchurian
Yeah, they
candidate. There
trained
was
the
another
Palestinians.
instance,
Yeah.
right? There was another instance where there was a Manchurian candidate that failed and he turned himself in. One would only guess what type of technology they have to, brainwash someone, so
We've
to
seen the
speak.
FBI do this too. I don't think the FBI did this because they love Kirk. Trump's FBI. Trump loved Charlie Kirk. It wasn't.
Yeah,
It wasn't Patel and them. But in the past, the FBI has COINTELPRO. They did that on Jan 6, for example. They did
right.
that for Vietnam protesters and so on.
Yep.
COINTELPRO is when you infiltrate a group as one of them, so you act like one of the hippies or whatever, and you encourage them to do violence. And then when they do, you arrest them. It's entrapment.
Right. Right.
But nowadays, what they do is COINTELPRO is all online. They radicalize people through Discord mostly.
Right.
You
Right.
saw that with a Buffalo shooter, where he's on Discord with like 6 spooks.
Yep.
And that's what they say about these Reddit kids. Like they'll do anything for their little private audience. These kids have severe narcissism. And that doesn't mean arrogant. That means like clinical narcissism means when the false audience syndrome, everyone's watching you when they're not. To their little yo chat. They'll do anything for their chat where they're the main character. Because in real life they're nobody. So they got this group that doesn't care about them at all, but it's the only thing paying attention to them. And they'll do anything to like have them be like, yo, based, whatever. They live for that. You saw that with Rampage Jackson's kid after he nearly murdered a guy in a wrestling ring, thought he was doing it was a work, and then he ended up actually hitting him.
Right.
The first thing he does is go outside, like, see chat. I'm not a bitch. Chat. He's in his own little world. And what did Tyler do? He went right to Discord and made jokes. And you see that with a lot of mass shooters. A lot of them are tranny, disproportionately anyway, and they're radicalized online. Now, the FBI does this. The Israelis can do this too. It doesn't take much of a poke or a push to get some weirdo in Antifa to do something violent. These kids are mentally ill anyway. Like, I'm a woman. I wished for
Right.
it. That's
Right.
not like, and I blame the left or anyone else that's enabling that says through the power of wishing you can just change sex. If you want to be gay, or if you are gay, be gay, I should say. If you want to wear a dress, wear a dress. You want to change your name, change your name. But you're not actually a girl. You can't play girls' sports. You can't go to girls' prison. You can't do things like we segregate for a reason because sexes are different and
Right.
girls are uncomfortable being in locker rooms with boys and so on and so on. So you can't just do that. If you want to pretend you're a girl and you want to go buy yourself some boobs and you want to go get on, hormone blockers and all that other stuff, you're just a man that got surgery. You're never going to be a woman because you're not a woman.
Right.
You have XY chromosomes. That's it. It's a fantasy, and it is child abuse to engage in that any more than if a kid said, I'm a dinosaur, you would say, no, you're not.
Right.
Well, I'm an astronaut. Okay, but you're not. Well, I'm a girl. Okay, let's go chop your dick off. Like these parents are mental. And a lot of it's the mothers. Not too often with the dad's okay with it, but then they can take their child away. I can't imagine being a father that lost their son because their crazy wife decided to make him a
It'd be
girl.
horrible. Right.
Yeah, and they do. This is a real thing. It's really happening.
Right.
I would lose
Right.
it. I can't believe there hasn't been a mass shooter who's some dad
Right.
that lost their son to their wife. Like,
Right.
lost their son to the craziness of trannyism. Even adults, man, if you're an adult, you want to do that. I think it's a very bad decision. I don't know if it should be legal. I think it's really stupid and all, but you cannot do that to children. You can't. I really don't like it allowed for adults, but I feel like they would just do it themselves on black market anyway. So,
Yeah, the
God.
whole industry around it needs to be stomped out because it is disgusting.
The culture shouldn't exist. Like it shouldn't
Right.
exist. It exists because the Soros types, they had many years during the Obama administration where you could not push back on that issue on Facebook or anywhere else. And
Right.
so it's all one-sided. And this is the power of media. If one side gets to speak and the other cannot, eventually even the most minority opinion will win because it's the only one that can speak. That's the power of the press. Most people don't think. They're told what to think. They're spoon-fed information. They don't know how to analyze. And so if you say something enough, trans people are people, and you're just a prejudiced, horrible person if you don't go along with this fantasy shit, then they will. They'll go along with it. Like, that's what the socially acceptable thing is, so I have to do that. There's nothing in them that clicks on reality and says, that's a man, it's a penis.
Right.
It's simple. And they confuse male and female with masculine and feminine. You can be an effeminate guy. You could be from California. You could be a masculine woman, right? You could be from New Jersey. But, like, it doesn't make you a man or a woman. It just makes you masculine or feminine. You could be Canadian, where you're androgynous.
You're amazing, Ryan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah,
You're
what
welcome.
a pleasure. ANCreport.com, RyanDawson.org. Go there. If I'm, a step on my own self here, but watch ANC Report instead of Truth Expedition. I mean, I honestly mean that. Ryan's doing the incredible work out there.
Just
We're
watch
just
them
trying
both.
to Pardon?
Yeah, just watch both.
Sure, you
But
can
I'll
do
tell you
that.
what, go watch that film. It's free for now. It's free right now. It might not always be. You get in there. It's 4 hours. You can skip to an hour and 11 minutes if you want to get right to the Israel stuff. I say you already know the Saudi stuff. It's in chapters. So, go in. I think people are like, oh man, that's too long. If you watch 15 minutes, you'll end up watching the whole thing.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yep. It's so well done and fast paced and evidence based. That's why I love it.
Yeah.
And all the work that you do.
I don't take a long time to make a point. It's point,
Right.
condensed information.
Yeah, I tell people to get your notebook out. It's so detailed. The work you do is like none other. And you've got the segments here for those with short attention spans. But I agree. You start watching it, you're gonna finish it. Maybe not in one sitting, but it's
yeah. You might not have 4 hours, but you got to plan that out. But man, it's September 11th. You ought to know. People died on that day. We ended up in a war in Iraq and Afghanistan because of it. It's something that you need to know, and it's something that, if this does well, then like Epstein's next. I have that. I have the client list right here.
Yep.
And I've had it out a long time. The problem is reach. The problem is it really doesn't matter what I know. I'm not Tucker Carlson with millions of fans. Like, it's all about reach. We have the information, so we're on step 2. Getting the information is very hard, but getting reach is equally as hard. And people with reach all they'd have to do is click share. It's that easy. Just boom. They don't have to do the research. They don't have to do anything. Just say, go look at this. This is what happened on 9/11. And all the time people wasted with Loose Change and Alex Jones and Richard Gage and Judy Wood and all these fucking morons. And you could just have the answer. And I'm not asking you, not even once, for speculation or benefit of the doubt or whatever. I am proving the case.
Right.
With documentation. Like, this is not arguable. This is right here in black and white. It's just getting all the pieces and putting them together that's a pain in the arse. But it's been done. So you could sit down with your family and watch it. I don't think it's like a popcorn type movie, but it's a notebook type movie, like you said. Like, get there, get your pen out, be ready, as we have it. And some of these same players, I'll bust this out. Some of these same people from Epstein, and this one doesn't show up as well because it's in pencil, but there's some more names. They are running the show right now. And that's what happened with Charlie Kirk. September 10th, what happened? The Senate voted 51-49 to not release the Epstein files. The story was buried. Why that day?
Right. It's wild.
Very strange.
No war with Iran.
No war with Iran,
guys,
for
I'm
sure.
going to bed. It's 11:30.
Peace.
So-
Much love, Ryan. Thanks so much for everything you do. We'll chat soon, sir.
Thank you so much. Fuck
Thank
Israel.
you. Thanks everyone for joining. That was fantastic.